The other day, I was thinking back to when I was like 22 years old, and there was this single conversation I had that completely changed my outlook on money and wealth. It was during this get-together party thing that one of my friends from college was having. And I knew most of the people that were there because they were also students at the same school. But a little while later, these two guys walked in that were like a couple years older than the rest of us in the room. So the first guy walks in and he's like,
"Hey, what's up everybody? This is my boy Preston."
and to be honest, there was nothing that really stood out about Preston. He had on sweatpants, a t-shirt, a Detroit baseball cap, and some Jordans on his feet. So really, he just looked like the rest of us because back in the early 2000s, that's just how we dressed as college students. So after some drinks, I got into this little conversation with Preston, and he mentioned to me that he actually did used to go to the school, but the reason I probably never saw him is because he failed all of his classes and then moved back home after the first semester. And to make matters even worse, when he moved back home, he ended up committing a crime and spending 2 years in prison. So by all means, I really didn't look at him as like this smart guy. In fact, at the time, thinking of his dumb decisions, he seemed kind of dumb to me. That was my initial impression. But then Preston said that he was gonna run to the store. And when he left, I happened to look out the window and noticed that he was driving a brand new Porsche. And I'm not gonna lie, I was thinking the exact same thing that you're probably thinking right now. I was like, yeah, he's probably a drug dealer. But me being this super nosy guy that I am, I had to know how it was that he was driving a new Porsche while half of the other people in the room didn't even have a car. So when he got back, we resumed our conversation. And I found out that actually Preston owned a trucking company. And he had over 20 employees and they were bringing in $5 million per year in revenue. In fact, an even larger trucking company had offered to acquire his business for $25 million and they were working out the details to finalize the deal. So here I was sitting with all of this college education and barely making over minimum wage, and here he was, a dropout and a felon who was making millions of dollars every year. And after that, Preston didn't seem so dumb anymore. In fact, I was kind of looking at myself like, shit, maybe I'm the dumb one. But that day, I came to a quick realization. I realized that financial success doesn't require this elite intelligence or these advanced degrees like I once thought. In fact, people who were far less educated than me were killing it as entrepreneurs and building these huge wealth empires. And it definitely wasn't that they knew more than me. I realized though that it was just that they knew certain things that they were able to apply over and over again, whether they had an education or not. And after 15 years of working with more than 1,000 startup owners as a startup coach and a startup consultant, I think I finally came to the conclusion to why it is that less educated people actually find it easier to become wealthy than us who have all these fancy degrees. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about the 3 things that these less educated entrepreneurs know that you probably don't know. And those are probably the exact things holding you back from achieving your wealth goals. So why is it that these intellectually average people can become millionaires while the smartest of us rarely figure it out? Well, the first thing is that they know that credentials and degrees really aren't the qualifiers of success. They might be the criteria for high-level jobs, but they're certainly not the prerequisite for success as an entrepreneur. Imagine having the phrase college dropout on your resume. I bet you would never get a job. But then you look at Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Michael Dell, Richard Branson, Henry Ford, Larry Page, and you realize that all of them were college dropouts. And the other thing they have in common is that all of them are also billionaires. Now, if you're gonna be a doctor or a lawyer, of course credentials are important. You have to go to law school or go to medical school to even qualify. I mean, you can't just start a medical practice and start doing surgeries and performing the duties of a doctor. That is, unless you're this guy who did that exact thing twice. But you don't necessarily need education to start most businesses. You don't need a business degree to be a good business person. And you don't need a bachelor's in entrepreneurship to be a successful entrepreneur. Let's just take a few seconds here and look at a couple statistics. In 2021, the median earnings of those with a master's or higher degree was $74,600, which was 21% higher than the earnings of those with a bachelor's degree, which was $61,600. In the same year, the median earnings of those with a bachelor's degree were 55% higher than the earnings of those who only completed high school, and their earnings was only $39,700. However, according to Fortune magazine, almost 30% of billionaires only have a high school diploma. Your education and your school knowledge, that's definitely gonna allow you to make more money as an employee. Unfortunately, your ability to do complex calculus problems or write a 100-page thesis on Dante's Inferno, that's not gonna help you at all as an entrepreneur. But the more educated that you are, the more that you likely feel that you need additional degrees or additional certifications in order to launch your business idea. Meanwhile, those who have less education, they do something that the rest of us might think is a bit crazy, or at least definitely quite risky. They just get started and learn as they go. They also do things like subscribing to this channel and liking the video. I mean, I'm just saying, if you want to. So, back to this conversation with Preston. He told me that he got out of prison in January, went to trucking school for 3 months, got hired, worked for the company for 6 months, and then started his business the next January. He went from not knowing anything at all about even driving a truck to starting his own trucking company in just 1 year. In comparison, I spent 4 years earning my bachelor's degree in marketing.
Stop the cap.
All right, look, I'm not gonna lie. It actually took me 5.5, but don't judge me. And only after all of those years was I able to land just an entry-level position for a marketing agency. And the craziest part is that the CEO of the company I was working for, he never even went to college. The truth is, the more education that you have, well, that's the more value that you actually put on education. And don't get me wrong here, education is important. The education that you need to win as an entrepreneur, well, that comes from jumping into the deep end and learning how to swim on a whim, because if you don't, you're gonna drown. And there's a totally different type of lesson that you're gonna learn from that type of situation. I don't care what they say. Nobody knows how to run a business until they're actually running one. And if you're spending all of that time in a business class, learning from some professor who also has never run a business, then you're kind of moving ass backwards. In business, impact means a lot more than credentials. Nobody knew Bill Gates as some software genius before he built Microsoft. Nobody looked at Mark Zuckerberg as some social media innovator until he launched Facebook. Because the truth is, both of them were dropouts and neither of them would seem qualified on paper. And that takes me to number 2. Less educated people, they know that the risk is worth the reward. Starting a new business, that's probably gonna be one of the riskiest things that you ever do. Statistics say that 90% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. And since you're so educated, I'm sure that you've taken some statistic class in the past. So you know that the odds of winning in that situation is almost worse than taking all your money to the casino. The more educated that you are, the more that you're gonna consider risks, because you spend all your time learning about all of those things that could go wrong and the impact that those things are gonna have on your life. The more education that you have, really the more that you have to lose. And you can honestly be too intelligent for your own good. And in those situations, the reward is not gonna seem worth the risk. And then you're thinking, I mean, sure, I could make $100 million with this business, but what if I lose this $5,000 that I have to put into it? And if not considering the risk sounds dumb, well, it is, because dumb people usually don't consider risks. They look at the reward and then they just go for it. And sometimes it works, and probably most times it doesn't. Like, take criminals for instance. When I'm watching the news and they're reporting on people who did these crimes, I'm like, damn, they didn't even consider any of the risks of getting caught. And those exact risks, those are what keep the rest of us from going out and committing crimes. But it's also what keeps the rest of us from doing things like starting businesses or making investments or improving our financial wealth. When you start considering the risks, that's what's gonna build up fear within you. When we think that there's more risk involved, then we have to think about it a little bit more. We have to do more research, and we have to consider all that could go wrong before we make a decision. And we get scared of all of the possible outcomes of what could happen if things don't work out. Now, college is really about helping you develop your critical thinking. But the problem is that education can just make you way too overly critical. Let me give you a little bit of an example to kind of drill in this point. Now, my 10-year-old, he really wants to develop a video game. That's literally like all that he talks about. And all he knows about building video games is that he wants to build a damn game. He doesn't know how to build a game. He doesn't know what it's gonna take to build a game. He just has this brilliant idea and now he wants to do it. And just to be transparent, when he first started talking about it, I actually had to stop myself a little bit because I immediately started telling him all the things that could go wrong. I'm like, man, that's a huge idea. That's gonna take millions of dollars to build. You don't have the skills to build that. And there's so much competition within that game category that it's gonna be so hard for you to win. And those are real risks. And he has no idea about those risks. He doesn't know how hard it is to actually code some shit and make it move and respond. He doesn't know that there were like 300 developers working on his favorite game and that it's almost impossible for one 10-year-old kid to build a game to that level. He just has an idea and now he's ready to fly. But me, I know the risks. And at the time, it scared me thinking about how disappointed he was gonna be if he jumped into this head first and it didn't work out. It brought fear to me, and I almost drew my fear all over his blank canvas. And the crazy thing is that I'm a startup consultant. I'm literally the guy that tells startup founders that they can make these things happen and tell them how to do it. And I was still scared to allow my son to do it. Because out of all of the different fears that can come up, the main one is the fear of failure. And that gets me to the third thing that I learned about why less educated people might find it easier to become wealthy. And that's because they know that that's their only option to really succeed. A person with low education, they're more likely to feel that they have to start a business in order to level up financially. But you with your bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees, you know that there are hundreds of jobs that you can get. If you lose your current job today, you know that next week you're probably gonna have another one. You know that your position at work is safe. It gives you a steady income. And even though you know that it'll never get you to that level that you really want to be at, it's safe. You get to keep your family fed, and that makes you feel safe. Sure, you're not driving Preston's Porsche, but you at least have a vehicle. And your house is a lot smaller than you want it to be, but at least you have a place to stay. In other words, that job makes you feel totally safe financially. But if you don't have any education, well, your options are a bit limited. Imagine if you never even earned your high school diploma. The cap of what you're probably gonna earn is what, $18, $19 an hour? Maybe if you're lucky, then one day you'll become the manager at some fast food establishment or at some retail store. You already don't have many options, so your fear of failure really isn't that high. And it's a lot less painful to fall off the first rung of a ladder than it is when you're 15 feet in the air. When you don't have many options, you have less risk, and with that, you have less fear. However, when those degrees that you have give you a ton of options, well, now you suddenly have a lot to lose by starting a business. Because throwing away your $90,000 salary for the hopes of eventual entrepreneurial success, that feels a lot different than throwing away a $15,000 a year salary for the same reason. But don't get me wrong, fear can be a good thing. If I'm walking through the woods and I come across a grizzly bear, fear is gonna tell me to stay the hell away from it. If I get too comfortable, or if I get too relaxed, or if I go and try to pat him on his head because I don't respect his power, then I'm probably gonna get ripped into pieces. But fear can also be the things that hold you back from your potential. If Elon Musk allowed fear to get in between him and his dreams of launching PayPal, then he would probably be like a fucking accountant or something right now. He definitely wouldn't be the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX with hundreds of billions of dollars in assets. Intelligence and education, those really are great qualities, don't get me wrong. If you use them correctly, they can propel you forward in business. But school was not ever made to make you some rich entrepreneur. School is really meant to make you a great employee. All of those different facts and formulas and skills that you learned in school, well, those weren't meant to help you become rich. They were meant for you to go and help somebody else become rich, and probably somebody who never even went to college. School is really about putting some fear in you about becoming an entrepreneur and making you comfortable with the fact that you now have what it takes to climb this proverbial corporate ladder. And when it comes to business, it's okay to be dumb for a minute. It's okay to start way before you're ready. Because in this world, in the world of entrepreneurship and startups, your degrees mean almost nothing. Your school knowledge means very, very little. And even after 13 years of being in business, I still have never had even one client ask me what my degree is or what school I attended. I mean, sure, it looks great in my bio, but really they only care about whether I can get the job done or not. We all walk into this game as babies, as blank canvases with no knowledge whatsoever on what it's gonna actually take to succeed in our business. For anybody that's actively seeking wealth, we all start in that same place that Preston started the day that he walked out of prison. So be dumb, but just get started as soon as possible, no matter what you lack or what knowledge you think you don't have. Every single day will bring more questions, and as an entrepreneur, it's your job to seek out those answers. Because the only thing that you need to do today to start a business is to take the next step. And you can learn exactly what that next step is by watching this video right here. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care and keep doing amazing shit.